In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the steering shaft on this Ford Expedition. This is the lower steering shaft that goes from your power steering rack and pinion to the upper or intermediate steering shaft that goes into the vehicle. So we're going to work under the hood for this. Let's get started. Now here's a little tip for you. Even though this has to do with steering, an alignment is not required for this job or after this job because you're not actually changing the alignment. You're just changing the connection from the inner steering shaft that's inside the vehicle down to the power steering rack and pinion. That is all. Under the hood, we'll be working right next to the coolant tank or the reservoir below the brake booster. And looking down here, you see the top of the steering shaft with that 13mm headed bolt right there that we're going to have to remove. To get better access, if you lift the front of the vehicle off the ground, you can easily turn the wheels so you can point this bolt upwards so that you can get to it with a socket and extension a whole lot easier. Now what you can also do is point it sideways towards the fender and then go in with a socket through the fender liner. That is what I'm going to do because I have easier access right through here, but once again through the top should be just fine as well. No matter what you do, you're going to need an extension and probably a swivel socket too. Now at this point you'll see a split right here. Eventually, once we are ready to disconnect this, we're going to have to insert a chisel or a pry bar here and hammer it in order to spread these two halves apart so that this can let go of the upper steering shaft. Now, what I will do for now is just soak it in some rust penetrant so that it can do its job while we disconnect the lower half. That way, it should make the disconnection later a little bit easier. All right, we'll just let that sit and do its job for a little bit. Moving underneath, at the bottom of the steering shaft, you'll see another 13mm headed bolt that we have to remove. Now this one you also want to turn the steering wheel in whichever direction will make it easier for you. For me, it's going to be right about here, and I'm going to need, once again, an extension and a swivel to remove that bolt. My bolt has been replaced, so I'm not using a 13, but if you have the original bolt, it should still be a 13mm socket. All right, now to separate this, what we need to do is come in from underneath with a pry bar and tap it upwards. This steering shaft does compress, so it should slide up into itself and come off of here. However, before we do this, it is very important that we tie off the steering wheel so that it doesn't spin. The reason I didn't tie it off yet is because I needed to have the ability to turn so I can get to my bolts. But now we need to tie it off, otherwise if it spins a bunch of times, it will break the clock spring. You can tie off the steering wheel however you want, but it's not like we're trying to stop it from moving altogether. We're just trying to stop it from spinning around in circles. So the easiest way that I find always is to just put the seatbelt right through it and then buckle it in. There we go. Especially when you have tiny holes like this that you can put it through, it really can't spin very far, and that's what we're going for. Our steering shaft is not splined, it's actually cut, you'll see in a second, so you can't put it on wrong, and it can only go on one way as long as you somewhat secure the steering wheel. Now, take a pry bar and a hammer and tap the steering shaft up. Perfect. This steering rack looks like it's somewhat new, so typically they're a little bit more stuck on here. Mine's been somewhat recently replaced, which explains why that bolt was also different, but this is now disconnected. Let's move up top and disconnect it there. Back up top, let's get a pry bar or a chisel, whatever you have that'll work, and hammer right into that split that I was talking about. This should help us open this up. Now the dipstick is in the way, and I don't want to snap the end off of it, so I'm going to remove it and set it aside. Not completely, just partially like this. And let's go ahead and hammer into this. Okay, that moves. So now what we want to do is hammer it down if we can with the pry bar in here so that it can keep it spread apart. I'm going to try to go through the fender liner and just tap this. All right, so now there's our steering shaft. I'm going to do the best I can to clean this area up, and I just want to get rid of most of the rust, honestly. Not up here, just right here where it connects, and then I will put some anti-seize. You can use some grease if that's what you have, just to keep the rust to a minimum over time. Nice coating of anti-seize on here should prevent the rust from building up for a long time. Now drop the new steering shaft down. And this is why I was saying earlier that you can't put it on wrong, because this is a square cutout. With the bolt cutout at the top, it can only go on one way. Same on the bottom. It's not a square, but it's a different shape that can only fit one way. All right, slide this over. If you're having trouble sliding it on, you can stick that pry bar back in here and spread it open, or just tap it with a chisel before you install it. And most likely it's because this, when it gets shipped, has the bolt in it and it stays pinched shut, so the metal is just, well, pinched shut. At this point, I might as well put the bolt back in it here. I put a dab of blue thread locker on these threads. I like to do that for steering shaft bolts because it is important that they stay locked in. All right, with that started, I might as well tighten it up now. This new bolt is a 16 millimeter. And the torque on this one is 35 foot-pounds. The only way I'll be able to torque it is through the wheel well, which unfortunately means using a swivel, and swivels alter the reading of the torque spec, but it's better than not torquing it at all. So here we go, 35 foot-pounds. Okay, that's good right there. Now this also has a lock washer here, so this bolt is tight and locked in. I'm going to push that oil dipstick back down. Same thing down here. I'm going to apply some anti-seize to the power steering rack and pinion shaft that connects to the steering shaft. It's honestly easier to just put it on my glove and kind of spread it around. And then once this is covered, we're ready to put the steering shaft back on. All right, now we'll grab the steering shaft here and slip that over once again. Might need to be expanded at the split if it doesn't fit over. And once that's bottomed out, we'll put the bolt in. This new bolt is a 13 millimeter. All right, let's snug it up. And we'll torque this to 22 foot-pounds. All right, I put a little bit of thread locker on this one too. Now remove the seatbelt or whatever you had securing the steering wheel, and there you have it. Job is done. This should steer a lot smoother now.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.